This is Nightline and I'm Raymond. The headlines. PM calls for EU deforestation-free regulation to be reviewed. And Muhyiddin questioned by MACC over 300 million ringgit fund. Good morning. Malaysia and Germany have agreed to review together the European Union Deforestation-Free Regulation EUDR, which previously affected the country's palm oil exports to the economic bloc. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim hopes that the EU will not be too rigid with its regulations imposed on Malaysian export commodities, especially palm oil products. In a joint press conference with visiting German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier at Perdana Putra on Friday, Datuk Seri Anwar called for the EUDR to be reviewed as the regulation presents complexity and challenges to the palm oil industry. As the world's second-largest palm oil producer, he explained that Malaysia has significant concerns regarding the implementation of the EUDR.
Your Excellency's visit, of course, would certainly attract the interest of many German investors into Malaysia. Our concern is also the issue of palm oil. EU deforestation-free products regulation will need to be reviewed together so that any attempt to protect the environment and focus on renewable energy would not be at the expense of our economy.
Datuk Seri Anwar pointed out that Malaysia faced some challenges during the negotiation process with the EU on the subject of palm oil as a result of the imposed conditions. He added that the regulation did not only affect palm oil products but also others like timber, cocoa and rubber. The Prime Minister also said that Malaysia aims to increase its export of sustainable palm oil to Germany and hopes that palm oil will become the leading commodity export to the country. He also voiced Petronas's interest to expand its export of liquid natural gas to Germany, seeing that gas supplies to Europe have been affected due to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Other matters discussed by the two leaders include the growing Islamophobia in certain parts of Europe, as well as boosting investments and cooperation in various fields, including biodiversity, ecology, and climate change. Germany is Malaysia's largest trading partner from the EU. In 2022, Malaysia's total trade with Germany increased by 10.9% to $13.62 billion from $13.03 billion in 2021. Earlier, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who is on a 3-day visit to Malaysia, was accorded a state welcome at the Parliament Square. Steinmeier and his wife, Eka Budenbender, were received by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong Sultan Abdullah Sultan Ahmad Shah and the Raja Permaisuri Agong Tunku Hajah Aziza Amina Maimuna Iskandaria. Also present were Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim and his wife, Datin Sri Dr. Wan Aziza Wan Ismail, and Deputy Prime Ministers Datuk Seri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi and Datuk Sri Fadilah Yusof. The welcoming ceremony began with a performance of the national anthems of Germany and Malaysia by the Central Band of the Royal Malay Regiment from Sungai Besi Camp, followed by a 21-gun salute. Steinmeier then inspected a guard of honour mounted by 4 officers and 103 men from the 1st Battalion of the Royal Malay Regiment, headed by Major Adiba Juez Shah Ahmad. Steinmeier's visit is expected to provide the best opportunity for Malaysia and Germany to strengthen ties and cooperation in various fields. Malaysia and Singapore have pledged to increase their cooperation in modern agriculture to enhance food security in both countries. During a courtesy visit by Singapore's High Commissioner to Malaysia, Vanu Gopala Menon, to Agriculture and Food Security Minister Datuk Seri Muhammad Sabu, the two countries discussed the importance of developing modern agriculture and utilizing smart technology in the agricultural sector. According to a statement by Malaysia's Agriculture and Food Security Ministry, Datuk Seri Muhammad Sabu also emphasised that food supply stability was a global issue and would need to be addressed jointly by both countries. Malaysia has invited Singapore to invest in the modern agriculture sector in Malaysia so as to be able to increase the food supply jointly. Singapore is set to share its technology and expertise in the field of smart agriculture. Both countries have given their commitment to strengthening bilateral trade in the field of agriculture in line with the goal of guaranteeing a sustainable and continuous source of food supply. Bersatu President Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin has given his statement to the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, MACC, in connection with its investigations into funds of 300 million ringgit linked to the party. According to MACC sources, the Perikatan Nasional chairman had his statement recorded at the MACC headquarters in Putrajaya on Thursday morning. Other than the former Prime Minister, the statements of several other Bersatu leaders were also recorded by the graft buster prior to this. It was understood that a probe into the funds allegedly linked to the COVID-19 economic stimulus package was in the final stage, and the investigation papers will most likely be ready in a week or two. The full report would then be handed over to the Attorney General's chambers for the next course of action. It was believed that more than 15 individuals, including Bersatu leaders and contractors, had been called up by the MACC for their statements to be recorded. MACC Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Azam Baki previously confirmed that several of Bersatu's bank accounts had been frozen to facilitate investigations into suspected illegal proceeds. The probe was being conducted under the MACC Act and Anti-Money Laundering, Anti-Terrorism, Financing and Proceeds of Unlawful Activities Act.
The 2023 budget, overcoming the cost of living issue, what is the strategy? Boosting Malaysians' welfare and quality of life, what does it take? Rebalancing spending and revenue to counter debt and liabilities. And what reforms can the Malaysia Madani concept offer? Economist Professor Jeffrey Williams shares his thoughts on money matters this Saturday at 5 p.m. only on TV3.
The state leaders of Pulau Pinang, Kedah, Selangor, Negeri Sembilan, Kelantan and Terengganu will meet next week to discuss a suitable date to dissolve their respective state assemblies to pave the way for state election in the 6 states. Pulau Pinang Chief Minister Chow Kon Yeow said Selangor Menteri Besar Datuk Seri Amiruddin Shari has initiated the joint meeting.
Selangor Menteri Besar is initiating a joint meeting of the 6 Menteri Besar and Chief Minister for a discussion to probably reach a consensus as to when the various state assembly can be dissolved to pave the way for general state election, and the time frame and the window is getting narrower and narrower.
He said this after the official launch of Armenian Park, Pulau Pinang's first augmented reality park in Georgetown. Chow had previously said Pulau Pinang would dissolve its state assembly to pave the way for the state election between May and July. Only Perlis, Pahang and Perak dissolved their state assemblies to hold state elections concurrently with a 15th general election on November 19th. Malaysia has not received any formal notice on purported seizures of Malaysian assets and those belonging to Petronas in Luxembourg by the self-styled heirs of the Sultan of Sulu. Law and Institutional Reform Minister Datuk Sri Azalina Othman Said said the government was therefore unable to confirm the accuracy of such media reports. In a statement on Friday, Datuk Sri Azalina went on to say that if the reports were indeed true, it would not be the first time that the purported Sulu heirs had attempted to seize Malaysia's assets in Luxembourg. The previous attempted seizures, she said, were made on the basis of a purported final award rendered by a Spanish lawyer whose appointment as arbitrator was nullified. Rather, this alleged new attempt to attach assets would follow a first and failed attachment, which was recently lifted by the Luxembourg courts. Dato' Sri Azalina also assured that Malaysia will continue to defend its rights vigorously before the courts in order to ensure that this second attachment, if existent, is also promptly lifted by the Luxembourg courts just as the first attachment was lifted. On Thursday, Reuters reported that Luxembourg court bailiffs issued fresh seizure orders for 2 units of Petronas this week, following a bid by descendants of a former sultanate to enforce a $15 billion award that they won against Malaysia. The award was granted to them by a French arbitration court last year. Earlier, Petronas in a statement maintained that the action taken by the Sulu claimants against its 2 subsidiaries in Luxembourg was baseless and will continue to defend its legal position. When we come back, Syrian family of 7 dies in fire after surviving quake. Stay tuned. Front now. More than 10 days after the devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, rescue operations have dwindled, and the focus has now turned to recovery and cleanup. The Turkish Disaster Management Agency has updated the death toll from the powerful earthquake in Turkey to 38,044, raising the overall number of fatalities in both Turkey and Syria to nearly 44,000 people. The death toll is certain to increase further as search teams retrieve more bodies amid the devastation. However, though the window for finding people alive is closing fast, rescuers on Friday managed to pull out a child, a woman, and 2 men alive from the wreckage. In the meantime, international aid agencies are stepping up efforts to help the millions left homeless, many of whom are sleeping in tents, mosques, schools, or in cars. The United Nations on Thursday has also appealed for more than $1 billion in funds for the Turkish relief operation, just 2 days after launching a $400 million appeal for Syrians. Meanwhile, a Syrian family of 7, including 5 children, has been killed in a fire that struck a Turkish home that they moved to after surviving last week's earthquake. According to authorities, the family had just moved to the central region of Konya a few days ago from the southeastern Turkish city of Nurdak in Gaziantep province that was severely hit by the quakes. They moved to stay with relatives at a single-story house that later caught fire and in which 14 other people lived. It was reported that the 5 children who died were aged between 4 and 13, while 7 other people injured in the incident are receiving treatment at nearby hospitals. 2 miners were found dead on Thursday after plunging down a void in a remote Australian zinc mine in Sydney, in one of the country's deadliest mining disasters in decades. It was reported that Dylan Landridge, 33, and Trevor Davis, 36, were working underground at MMG's Dugal River zinc mine near Cloncurry when their vehicle fell partway down a 15-meter void. Rescuers found and extracted the vehicle a day later, but the two men had died from their injuries. Another worker was also involved in the incident when the drill rig he was operating fell about 15 meters down. The men, however, escaped with minor injuries. Thursday's tragedy marks the equal deadliest mining disaster since 1999, when an air blast killed 4 people at North Parks in New South Wales. Thailand's Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has a date in mind for when Parliament will be dissolved, which he said will come before the government's term ends late next month. He, however, declined to disclose the date in his remarks to reporters late on Thursday, which was the first time Prayut had said the House would be dissolved early. Early dissolution could be advantageous to Prayut, who has fared poorly in recent opinion polls against the Pheu Thai party's Paitongtarn Shinawat. The ballot could make for a grudge match for the premiership that pits 2 royalist former army chiefs against the billionaire Shinawat family, whose elected governments the generals helped to overthrow in coups in 2006 and 2014. According to a timeline in the Constitution, an election must be held before May 7th.
Really did hammer home that we don't
With sports. Alpine are the final F1 team to unveil their new 2023 car ahead of pre-season testing next week. During the unveiling, it was revealed that the team will continue to race with a French Racing Blue and BWT Pink livery on the A523, although it too follows the recent trend of leaving parts of its car in unpainted carbon fiber to save weight. Drivers Esteban Ocon and newcomer Pierre Gasly, who joins from AlphaTauri, presented a car which appears to build on the strengths of its predecessor, the A522. As in 2022, the team also presented a second predominantly pink livery, which will be used in the opening 3 races in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and Australia. Last year, Ocon and Fernando Alonso enjoyed a solid year for the French manufacturer as it leapfrogged McLaren to claim 4th place in the Constructors' Championship, behind top teams Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes. Ocon and Gasly will be hoping the A523 proves more reliable than its predecessor, with a spate of retirements preventing the team from scoring even better results in 2022. On to football, the Japanese J-League. Champions Yokohama F. Marinos got their 2023 campaign off to a flying start on Friday as they beat Kawasaki Frontale 2-1. Frontale, with 4 league titles in 6 years, are tipped to be one of the contenders for this year. But F. Marinos had ambitions of their own and took a 2-goal lead going into the break thanks to Takuma Nishimura and Elbert finding the back of the net on 4 and 38 minutes respectively. Frontale were then reduced to 10 men after Jaisal was sent off in the 86th minute after denying Marcos Jr. an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. The home side managed to pull one back in added time through captain Kento Tachi Banada, but F. Marinos hung on for the 3 points at the Todoroki Stadium. Woman and her lover charged with killing husband. This and more after this short break. Welcome back to Nightline. Dato Sri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi wants the Court of Appeal to review the Kuala Lumpur High Court's decision that dismissed his application to obtain his passport, which he said was for him to carry out his official duties as the Deputy Prime Minister. In his notice of motion filed on February 13th, Dato Sri Ahmad Zahid said the High Court's dismissal would prejudice his rights and responsibility, as he would have to officially apply to get access to his passport each time he has to leave the country for official work. He is seeking for the Court of Appeal to reconsider his application for a permanent release of his passport and said he was ready to accept any conditions imposed by the court. The DPM's passport is currently under the safekeeping of the court as part of his bail conditions in his graft trial involving the misappropriation of funds from charity foundation Yayasan Akal Budi. On January 20th, Dato Sri Ahmad Zahid made the application for a permanent release of his passport for him to carry out his duty as the Deputy Prime Minister. In Selangor, a woman and an Indian national man were charged at the Shah Alam Magistrates Court with the murder of the woman's husband 2 years ago. 23-year-old Lachami Devi, also an Indian national, and 30-year-old Varun Kumar were jointly charged with murdering 25-year-old Ashdeep Singh, also an Indian national, in a senior citizen's home in Subang Jaya in October last year. No pleas were recorded before Magistrate Muhammad Shafiq Sulaiman because murder cases are under the purview of the High Court. The duo were charged under the Penal Code for murder, which provides for death sentence upon conviction. The court fixed April 14th for mention. It was reported that the case was brought to light after a male Indian national confessed to killing another Indian national in May before burying the body behind a bungalow used as a senior citizen's home in Subang Jaya. The Kuala Lumpur High Court on Friday reduced the 5-year prison sentence to 1 year against Repco Holdings Berhad's former executive chairman, Low Tiem Hock, who was found guilty of manipulating the company's share price. Judge Dato Azhar Abdul Hamid gave the ruling after finding that the 5-year prison sentence meted out against Low by the Sessions Court on February 29, 2016 was excessive. However, the court upheld the 5 million ringgit fine imposed on the 60-year-old accused, better known as Repco Low. Dato Azhar, in making the decision, agreed with the submissions of the prosecution as well as the issues raised in this appeal and found that the appellant's conviction is safe before dismissing the appeal. He also allowed Low's application to stay the execution of the prison sentence and fine pending an appeal at the Court of Appeal. The judge also maintained the conditions of the previous bail, which was 1.3 million ringgit, and for Low's passport to be handed over to the court. On February 29, 2016, Sessions Court Judge Madgani Abdullah sentenced Low to 5 years in prison and fined him 5 million ringgit after finding the defence had failed to raise reasonable doubts at the end of the prosecution's case. In 1999, Low was charged with instructing a representative of Syme Securities Sdn Bhd to buy Repco Holdings shares by absorbing any offer price of the shares offered on the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange KLSE. The act was deemed to have created confusion about the price of the shares on the KLSE. This has been Nightline. Before we go, let's take a look as dazzling light shows from the yearly Sharjah Light Festival adorn the facades of the Emirates' most prominent mosques, highlighting their aesthetics, architectural details, and ornate designs. With that, I'm Raymond Goh. Thank you for watching. Be safe and have a great weekend.